this is sad. Here you have someone pretending to be a tough guy turn out to be just a second banana for Joy Behar, the poster child for Trump derangement. Sadly, Bob is now just another gibbering, enfeebled ninny, surrounded by inept relatives as he frets about how Trump's in power and he's not. See, Trump's rise coincides with De Niro's decline. And the person who knows it most is De Niro. He's a fine example of how not to turn loss into bitterness. There are plenty of people who don't like Trump, but don't let it warp their minds or their ability to speak aloud among grown-ups or The View. But the Schiffs and De Niros of the world are emotionally damaged by politics to a point where they can't even assess their own emotions.
What do you get when Fox News' fun-sized firecracker Greg Gutfeld goes head-to-head with Hollywood's grumpiest grandpa Robert De Niro? A verbal beatdown so savage it made Raging Bull look like a nap in a yoga studio. De Niro tried to play the tough guy, because that's all he's got, but Gutfeld came out swinging with sarcasm, sass, and a killer punchline that shut Bobby down cold, wondering how a late-night host dismantled a legendary actor. Buckle up, this roast was worthy of an Oscar.
Last night, an elderly, confused man went missing in New York. Luckily, a band of self-satisfied elitists found him babbling on the street, threw some pants on him, gave him a stage.
Oh my God.
I'm going to say one thing. Trump.
Once upon a time, in the fading land of forgotten Oscars and former glory, Robert De Niro decided he wasn't just an actor anymore. No, he crowned himself the grand ambassador of moral righteousness, political wisdom, and Hollywood-fueled outrage. Because apparently when the nation is drowning in real problems, what we all truly need is an 80-year-old movie star yelling from the penthouse of his Manhattan tower about how the rest of us are living life completely wrong.
Robert De Niro graced the knitting circle in hell known as The View, where he tried to link random thoughts into a sentence. Joy was there to wind him up, since he's played some of the most unredeemable characters.
You have played some of the most really unredeemable characters. Travis Bickle. Travis Bickle was a psychopathic taxi driver. Jake LaMotta, who used to beat his wife, and he was in the Raging Bull. Is Trump worse than they are?
To me, he is.
If you're enjoying this takedown, don't forget to smash that subscribe button. Now enters Greg Gutfeld, the man who looks like he scrolls Reddit just to pick a fight. And somehow, against every odd and shred of common sense, he pulled off what most wouldn't even attempt, a high-definition, sarcasm-powered demolition of Hollywood's loudest moral megaphone. No shouting, no screaming, just pure dry wit so sharp it could dehydrate an entire rainforest.
Being an actor is tough. For how does one handle real life without a script? Not equipped to think analytically, you're left powerless when observing your own predictions about life turn out wrong. It's not supposed to be this way, De Niro thinks. Only the cool guys get to win. Sorry, Bob. That's only in the movies, but at least you'll always have joy.
De Niro once carried the weight of culture itself. He was the guy you watched in mafia epics while sneaking nervous glances over your shoulder. Now, he's the crank who pops up uninvited at political rallies, wearing a face that screams, "I just swallowed a lemon, and democracy is doomed all at once." He may have perfected the art of brooding, but lately his brooding is so constant it's starting to look less like a talent and more like a chronic condition.
It kills me. Talk about persuasive. Really, I was on the fence about Trump, but then I decided to really listen to one of the great generational leaders of American pop culture. And the clenched fists at the end, that really drove it home. It looked like he was pressing a 2-pound weight in a Jenny Craig commercial.
Oh my God.
Look at it again. It's so cute. It's like he found out the restaurant serves Jell-O, or that he won a $10 scratch off, or he scored a cameo in Jersey Shore, or he had his first #2 in a week.
Gutfeld didn't need a grand stage, just a spotlight and a dose of common sense. And when that light hit De Niro, the so-called legend didn't shine. He wilted. Strip away the layers of angry Hollywood elite energy, and what's left is a man who thinks connecting with everyday Americans means screaming at them in interviews nobody wanted. While De Niro rehearsed his latest role, America's most outraged grandpa, Gutfeld was busy taking notes, not for acting tips, but to study study a rare species, the unintentionally hilarious celebrity. This peculiar creature thrives at award shows, gets loudest during election season, and survives solely on a diet of self-importance. And De Niro. He's perfected the craft of talking down to audiences from the safety of a gilded stage, believing every sentence is a monologue and every listener is his captive. But this time, someone in the back row raised a sarcastic eyebrow, and it belonged to Greg Gutfeld. And let's be clear, Gutfeld didn't fight him with fury. He fought him with eye rolls.
Yeah, poor Bob. You know, he's like a star whose girlfriend dumps him for a bigger star who's in the White House while you're in Dirty Grandpa. Oh, man. So now the resistance is reduced to applauding Tantrums. Who knew De Niro's lasting role would be irrelevant gas bag, pleasing irrelevant peers? And he's doing this as Trump organizes a summit. Not a war, a summit. And you got to wonder, if it were President Hillary, Bob's choice, would you actually have a summit or would you have a war? But forget deeds. What matters is adulation received from an emotional display before a packed sea of millionaire lemmings. So who cares that Trump meets with North Korea? It's no meet the parents. Right, Travis?
Gutfeld simply voiced the truth everyone else was too polite to say. How absurd is it that a man who spent decades pretending to be other people suddenly believes he's the authority on who the rest of us should be? That's not just irony. It's irony in a tuxedo, barging into a charity gala uninvited. And the contrast was devastating. De Niro delivered his sermons with all the subtlety of a soap opera character discovering an evil twin, while Gutfeld hit back with the dry bite of someone leaving a scathing Yelp review. As De Niro puffed up his chest like a grumpy rooster freshly addicted to Twitter, Gutfeld calmly exposed the disconnect. A man who hasn't set foot in a Walmart since VHS tapes were on the shelves, now claiming to speak for the working class. The math didn't add up, and you could practically hear the crumble of legacy as Gutfeld unveiled the greatest sin of all, irrelevance. Not because De Niro aged, not because his acting heyday has passed, but because he confused celebrity with wisdom and fame with infallibility. In Hollywood, that's not a faux pas. That's a terminal condition.
De Niro clearly has thought about this, more so than his career. His choice of roles is now down to cinnamon and lobster. He was then asked about the Trump kids. At least he doesn't want my kids to take this the wrong way.
I don't want my kids to take this the wrong way, but if my kids did what these kids did, I wouldn't want to be related to them. I would disown them.
With his signature deadpan delivery, Gutfeld did the comedic equivalent of holding up a mirror, and De Niro hated what he saw, because instead of Travis Bickle or Vito Corleone staring back, the reflection was an out-of-touch millionaire scolding the masses from behind the gates of his private garden. The beauty of it all, Gutfeld barely had to lift a finger. De Niro practically served him the material on a silver platter, wrapped in righteous fury and garnished with dramatic pauses. The once great actor has morphed into the living embodiment of an angry Facebook rant. This wasn't a duel, it was a one-man comedy act with De Niro as the unwilling punchline. Gutfeld worked the audience like a pro. De Niro just played himself, and the crowd knew the difference. When Gutfeld started slipping in stats and exposing the contradictions, things got intense. Not because he shouted louder, but because he whispered smarter. That's the true sting of sarcasm. It cuts in silence, but the wound lasts. He mocked the very idea of celebrity activism being worshipped as gospel, because really, nothing screams man of the people like spending weekends at Cannes and weekdays ranting about injustice from the leather seats of a luxury SUV.
What a sad end for a great actor. He went from Raging Bull to this. You know, De Niro kind of represents Hollywood in the sense that they realize that they're losing influence with the public, and that's what's generating the emotional response. They've never felt less important.
And the crowd? They weren't offended, they were entertained, because Gutfeld said what everyone else was tired of pretending not to see. Hollywood's emperors strut around in outfits that are flashy, pricey, and completely see-through. The comedy practically wrote itself. Here was De Niro, a man who hasn't stepped inside a subway since the Reagan years, lecturing America about the struggles of the working class. Meanwhile, Gutfeld, a guy who looks like he's wrestled vending machines, delivered punchlines that landed with people who actually keep track of grocery bills. De Niro's idea of rebellion is scowling at cameras. Gutfeld's version is pointing out that he's scowling at the wrong people. The real kicker? Gutfeld treated the Showdown like a casual roast. No rage, no malice, just hilariously precise comedy, like peeling a banana only to discover it's really a microphone for another rant. De Niro aimed for gravitas, but what he got was a comedic takedown that turned him into a living case study in Hollywood ego. And Gutfeld, he didn't even need to destroy him. De Niro did that himself, just by opening his mouth and proving his politics are about as refined as a high school debate squad on Double Espresso.
Before I get to you, let's go to, I think he was in Canada, Toronto, opening a restaurant or doing something, and this is what he had to say.
And I just want to make a note of apology for the idiotic behavior of my president. It's a disgrace. And I apologize to Justin Trudeau, and the other people at the G7. It's disgusting.
You know, I actually feel bad for him because I think he's one of those people that has never emotionally recovered from 2016. This is a guy who's got serious Trump disorder.
Let's talk about that delicious reversal, when the man famous for playing gangsters got verbally whacked by the guy known for being the smallest guy at the table with the biggest mic. Gutfeld didn't even strut or gloat, he just chuckled, because when the truth is already absurd, mockery becomes a public service. Sure, De Niro's dramatic monologues may still earn applause at cocktail parties on the coasts, but Gutfeld's punches land in the real world, where people care more about grocery prices than celebrity tantrums. There was something perfectly chaotic about seeing an A-list actor get fact-checked by a late-night comic who treats politics like an improv set. That's what made it brilliant. Gutfeld didn't humiliate De Niro by going low. He embarrassed him by staying grounded. The real sting wasn't in Gutfeld's words, but in the fact those words had been waiting to be spoken for years. The so-called De Niro mystique had expired ages ago, and Gutfeld finally slapped a bright red past due sticker on it. He turned De Niro's tirade into a museum piece, a polished exhibit of Hollywood pretending it still has its finger on the nation's pulse. Spoiler alert? It doesn't. It beats with all the energy of an antique metronome stuck in a dusty piano.
Jesse, I find that he's smartest when they drop his audio. But, you know, it's kind of sad because you can see, like, people who are stuck in some kind of, I don't know, derangement, they can't see it themselves. And they're not surrounded by people telling them that they have a problem. And they lack self-awareness because everybody either tells them they're wonderful or wants to sell them cocaine. So he has no clue what he's doing, and he's upset over the emotional nature. His anger is emotional about Trump. It's nothing practical.
You're right.
And just like that, the power dynamic flipped. The actor was still acting, but the audience wasn't in a theater. They were in real life, laughing at the absurdity of a man trying to play philosopher king when his last truly relevant role was more than a decade ago. The aftermath? De Niro vanished into the usual haze of celebrity outrage, while Gutfeld basked in the glow of a takedown so effortless it left no bruise, just the sting of truth. And then came the final blow. Robert De Niro's career didn't collapse in fiery spectacle. It fizzled out under the cold fluorescent lights of reality TV satire. Because legacy is like wine. It either matures gracefully or sours into vinegar. Someone insists still has character. In De Niro's case, he popped the cork, poured it into a red Solo cup, and started shouting at the clouds. And Gutfeld? He didn't even break a sweat. No screaming. No personal insults, just a raised eyebrow and the patience to let De Niro's delusion unravel like a moth-eaten monologue from a forgotten Broadway flop. It wasn't even a takedown. It felt more like a buddy, are you okay? Intervention. The audience didn't boo De Niro. They tilted their heads, squinted, and wondered if the teleprompter glitched or if the man had entered his grumpy statue outside MoMA phase for good.
He is the most boring interview. He used to sell his movies on Leno and Letterman, and it was like watching a WNBA game. You just were just bored to death. All of a sudden, Trump became president, and he started saying things. I want to punch the president in the face. You know, he's a crooked piece of... And then all of a sudden, De Niro became interesting during his media tours. And that's the only way now he can get publicity for his film, is by cursing and saying...
Because here's the kicker. De Niro didn't stumble because of age. He's not irrelevant simply because time caught up with him. He's fading because he clings to an inflated museum piece version of himself that stopped connecting with real people back when Blockbuster still had a parking lot full of cars. While he imagines himself the conscience of America, most Americans just wish he'd stick to roles where he isn't barking like a retired drill sergeant trapped in a sketch comedy skit. Gutfeld understood the assignment. He didn't drag De Niro through the mud. He simply held up a mirror and let De Niro do the dirty work himself. That's the sting. Exposure, not insult. The gap between how De Niro sees himself as some mythic voice of culture and how the public actually sees him, a once great actor now moonlighting as the angry uncle in the group chat, and the implosion. It was spectacular, like watching a dusty jukebox suddenly try to download Spotify. De Niro kept swinging at shadows, performing roles no one wanted, while Gutfeld just smirked, coffee in hand, as if to say, "So this is the great Robert De Niro, huh?" The humiliation wasn't in being mocked. It was in not realizing he'd become the punchline before the first joke even landed. Legacy must be earned, relevance must be maintained, and De Niro lost both, buried under a pile of angry speeches and tone-deaf appearances. Gutfeld didn't rob him of glory, he just pulled back the curtain and showed the world that the so-called legend wasn't towering anymore, just loud. And when the punchlines hit, the silence that followed was deafening. Because here's the truth, the audience doesn't crave another millionaire shouting vague slogans. They want someone who can slice through the noise with a wink and a smirk, and Gutfeld delivered. He exposed the Emperor's wardrobe malfunction without ever raising his voice. Just a few jokes, a splash of truth, and a perfectly timed pause, like casually washing away a sandcastle with a garden hose. De Niro tried to bring Shakespeare to a comedy club. Gutfeld handed him a pie to the face. And in the end, that was the true humiliation. Not that De Niro was mocked, but that the mockery made far more sense than his monologue. As the credits roll on this one-man demolition of cinematic sanctimony, one thing is undeniable. If Gutfeld ever gets bored of late night, he could teach a masterclass in the comedic deconstruction of celebrity egos. And that's how the saga closed. Greg Gutfeld, the sarcastic sniper of late night, turned Robert De Niro's self-proclaimed wisdom into a comedy sketch the nation couldn't stop watching. It wasn't rage. It wasn't cruelty. It was precision. A late-night host, armed with little more than wit and timing, dismantled decades of Hollywood ego in front of millions. De Niro, once feared on screen, became the unwilling punchline off-screen. And the beauty of it all, Gutfeld didn't even need to crush him. De Niro did that by mistaking fame for relevance and confusing applause for respect. The irony was undeniable. Hollywood's so-called conscience silenced not by censorship, not by critics, but by laughter. Gutfeld's takedown wasn't just entertainment, it was a cultural reset. It reminded everyone that legacies can expire, egos can implode, and even the loudest voices can be drowned out by a single well-timed smirk. So when the credits roll on this unexpected showdown, the image is unforgettable. Robert De Niro scowling into the void, while Greg Gutfeld sips his coffee, eyebrow raised, delivering the quietest but deadliest line of the night without saying a word. Because in the end, the real story wasn't about an aging actor or a witty comedian, it was about a culture waking up to the obvious. When Hollywood royalty preaches, it's comedy. When Gutfeld responds, it's clarity. And in that clarity, the mighty Robert De Niro became just another punchline in the long, hilarious history of celebrity self-destruction.